The next concept I want to introduce to you is that of what I like to call threshold, and we've sort of danced around it, and many of you have heard me talk about this before, or have read things I've written about it. But this is a real key concept in this whole program and in any kind of personal growth. So here's the way I look at this concept of threshold. And this is kind of my explanation of where the so-called dysfunctional feelings and behaviors that a lot of us started doing personal growth work because we wanted to get past that kind of stuff, where that sort of thing comes from. I believe that every person has an individual threshold for what they can handle coming at them from the universe, from the world, from their environment. and it's different for everyone. And when your threshold is reached, whatever it happens to be that's stimulating you, when your threshold is reached, you begin to feel stressed. And when you begin to feel stressed, you begin to take measures to try to cope with that. And unfortunately, a lot of the ways that people try to cope with that don't work. But that doesn't keep us from doing them. And it's my feeling that anger, depression, anxiety, fear, substance abuse, and dozens of other dysfunctional feelings and behaviors and other coping mechanisms are really attempts to deal with the fact that we have been pushed to, or in some cases even past, that threshold. Some of these coping mechanisms are socially acceptable, like taking a hot bath or talking to a friend or exercising, and some of them are not socially acceptable. But at any rate, these are things that people do when they hit that threshold. Now, I believe that when someone grows up and they have some kind of trauma in their childhood, the threshold does not mature in the same way it would have if they had not had the trauma. And so these people that have been traumatized in some way grow up with a threshold for what they can handle coming at them from the world that is lower than optimal and lower than it would have been if they hadn't had this trauma. Now, the trauma that I'm talking about could be very overt. It could be, parents that beat you or, really emotionally abused you. Or a divorce, or a parent or brother or sister or close relative or something dying, or some other traumatic experience you had. But it can also be some things that are very subtle and not very overt. If you took any average group of people, and this is not an average group of people, these are this is a group of people that are all personal growth voyagers and have a much higher awareness of what's going on than the average group of people. But most people, if you ask them, how was your childhood, most people say, oh, it was fine. Yeah, I had a fine childhood. It was okay. And then you find out more about them, and you find out all these horrendous things that happened to them that they thought were normal, because it didn't involve getting slapped around, maybe. But maybe every time they started to express a certain need they had, their mother said, in this family we don't do that. And they were very kind about it. But they just said, no, we don't do that. Or maybe they just got a raised eyebrow when certain emotions were expressed or certain needs were expressed. So, without going into a long list of things, just what can have happened to us can be very subtle. And it can have been done by someone very pleasantly, someone could control you or stifle you in a way that was really impossible to resist because they were so nice about it. I had a grandmother that was that way. She was just so pleasant and so nice all the time, but she had an iron grip on everybody that was around her. And there was nothing you could do, really, unless you wanted to create a big stink. And then she would, she was just amazed that anyone could be unpleasant when everyone was being so pleasant. And that's only one version of it. So I'm sure you could vouch for this too, Bev, that lots of people will say, oh, nothing bad happened to my... But they're exhibiting all kinds of, weird behaviors and feelings and so on. So it's obvious that something happened. Well, my model for this really is that their threshold for what they can handle, because of this trauma, whatever it was, overt or subtle, did not mature in the same way that it would have, should have, could have, if this trauma had not occurred. And you all know people like this, who the slightest thing that happens in their environment sets them into anger, or feeling down, or being anxious, or being fearful, or whatever. That their threshold for what they can deal with is very low, and they're always in some kind of turmoil or stress or overwhelm. Now, on the personal experience record, I use the term overwhelm, that last question when it asks about overwhelm, and I really should change that and put stress or overwhelm, because a lot of people send those in and they write it, no, I didn't have any overwhelm. And the rest of the personal experience is all about their overwhelm. And then they get to the part about overwhelm and they say, no, I didn't have any. And it's partly because people, when they think of overwhelm, they think of overwhelm, where they're just freaking out. And some people very quietly go around, dealing with their overwhelm. And they don't think it's overwhelm because they're clamping down on it in some way to handle it. So, I believe that all dysfunctional feelings and behaviors are a result of being in an environment that you can't handle because the threshold you have for handling it is just too low. And that means that the person who is schizophrenic and psychotic, that those behaviors are a coping mechanism also. Those people are creating alternate realities in order to cope with what's going on. It's just in a more extreme way of dealing with it than you may be using. So when you look at this program and using Holosync, one way to describe what I think is happening is that as you use the program, your threshold for what you can handle coming at you from the world gradually is pushed higher and higher and higher. This pushes at that threshold and pushes it higher. And this explains a couple of things. It explains, first of all, why people pretty universally report as they go through this program that things less and less bother them. And one of the first things that happens to most people is they say, I was talking to my mother on the phone last night. And usually when she'll say, well, what are you doing Saturday night? Well, nothing, Mom. What? When are you going to start dating? Or, whatever the mother's trip is that she's, and they'll say, usually when she says that to me, I get so pissed off and I want to climb through the phone and strangle her. But this time she said it and I just went, that's Mom. Oh well, no big deal. And I was amazed that it didn't bother me. It didn't send me into this emotional thing that I usually do. And that kind of stuff begins to grow and grow and grow. And Patty can tell you that it can get to the point where you get to the point in some cases where you don't care about anything. Nothing seems to push on you at all, which is kind of a temporary thing. You go through that stage, and then when you come out the other side, you go into this sort of self-actualized place where your motivation for doing things is because you want to help the world, and Patty is already doing that, of course, because I know what she does. But